be back. Thanks very much, Puneet, for setting up this event. All these events, the group, it's really helping. And all the Pune team, all your regional teams, thank you so much for helping out the community. This is absolutely awesome what you guys do. And I was just thinking, I've been thinking for the longest time that I want to do something like this, but it's just too time consuming, and efforts and all that are involved. Awesome work you guys are doing. Please keep it up. Um, so I think Puneet has gone ahead and put some polls, two questions on the poll for you guys. And if whenever you get a chance, just put it on in the next 2 3 minutes or so. It'll really help. Just look at a few things that we are going to do. So my main agenda today is not to give a theory and presentation, but that will be just a 5 10 15 minute primer. But then I want to open up. I've got some excellent questions from you guys, and we'll try to cover a lot of them as well. Obviously, I'll focus a little bit more on the interview related questions. There are other things like, can I go abroad, work abroad? What is the API documentation? We can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I won't go into details of, I think, Puneet and Madhvi, they have introduced me well enough. I do have, I started tech writing in 1995 with KPIT in Pune, moved to Singapore, worked with a couple of companies. That time it was downturn, so I was not getting the kind of jobs and salaries that I was looking for in Singapore. That was in 96, 97 till 2000. Moved to Philadelphia, then moved to New York. From New York, I went to Bay Area in San Francisco. Spent 6 7 years in San Francisco, and then I came back to Pune. I was the tech pubs manager for Philips, not Philips, Persistent Systems. Um, and after that, I was also working in TIPCO systems, TIPCO software. I was working in NVIDIA graphics for a while. I used to teach at that time at Pune Institute of Business Management, Technical Communications. I taught at Symbiosis Institute of Management Studies in Khadki in Pune, and I also taught at BITS Pilani, the communications program at that time. Then I moved to Toronto, in Canada, where I spent 6 7 8 years. I came back 4 years ago, and now I've been working in Pune, which is my hometown. So I've been interviewing a lot of people, on most of my jobs I've been interviewing, and I see a stark difference in how people prepare or don't prepare for tech writing. And when I was thinking of some good topic, there's a lot of data and FrameMaker and RoboHelp and all these topics, great topics out there, which there are a lot of other people who are more qualified than me to speak about the technical aspects. But I thought, this is a soft skill that you must have. um, and I want to basically all the questions that I've got, but also what I'm seeing on the ground of how people come and prepare and all that. So we'll go through that. You'll see I don't have a boring slide deck or a PowerPoint presentation. I'm using a tool called Prezi, which I love. I've been using it for years. And if you have not used it, this is what it looks like. I've created a lot of different, you know, um, presentations in that. But try it out, Prezi.com. So basically, I'm going to focus on the effective interviews for tech writers, right? But my main focus is, also you have to understand what are the company requirements, right? Company requirements, job requirements, and what are your skills and your strengths that you are going to bring to the table, right? So let's look at a couple of these things. What we are going to do is, look at technical writing interviews, and I'm going to sort of put it upside down, and I'm going to redefine how we prepare for all this, right? And how we can go in feeling prepared, but also making sure that we are comfortable with any question that might get asked. So we'll look at a little bit. See, your interview doesn't start when you say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or whatever it is on the call or face to face. Your interview starts during your resume preparation, because that is the first step. right? If you don't step out of your house, you're not going to get to wherever you're going, right? So preparing your resume is like stepping out of your house, right? You have to do it well, because if you screw up on your resume, you're not getting that call, that's for sure. So resume, I won't spend time on resumes and all that, because that's not the topic of this presentation. But once you prepare your resume, I'll spend like 2 minutes on it. You have to anticipate what kind of questions you might get asked, right? Then what are the most common questions and how do you prepare yourself? That's basically the 15-minute spiel that I want to do. Um, I'm not sure how many of you know that there are two types of resumes, right? So you choose the type of resume that best works for you. You anticipate the keywords from the job description. I had recently done, well, not recently, about last year, 6 7 8 months back, I had done a LinkedIn effectively for job search, for STC. And there I talked about how do you work on your keywords, and how do you add it to, to your profile or to your resume. So I'm sure the link is floating out, some video out there, we can get that. You have to customize the resume. A lot of time when I'm interviewing, when I go through a resume, I see that the resume was created like a master document, and the same resume is sent out for every job. That's no good. You have to customize it. You have to tailor your resume for every job that you send out. Okay. Again, I won't go into too much detail, but one of the first things, and I'm also focusing on, the fact that you send these resumes, let's say to Oracle, to Intel, to IBM, to a lot of these companies. The recruiters, the talent acquisition guys are not always in India only, right? They might be all over the place. And before they shortlist you, they might go to your LinkedIn profile. They might go and search you up on social media. So you always should have your resume aligned to your social media, or sorry, the other way. You should have your social media, especially LinkedIn, aligned. If you are calling out a job on your resume, or a profile, or a career, one of your roles on your resume, and it's missing in your LinkedIn, immediately it creates some kind of a doubt that, hey, it's there on the resume but it's not on the LinkedIn. Why? Right? You don't want that kind of a thing happening. You can include some kind of recommendations on your resume itself. I do this a lot, right? My last page of my resume has like 7 or 8 different recommendations. I have about 50 to 60 recommendations on my LinkedIn profile from all kinds of people. And here's one that I'm showing here. It's just one sample of what I got on my presentation on effective use of LinkedIn for job search, right? So when I put something like this, and it's specific to that role that I'm applying to, let's say it's a manager's role, or let's say it's a tech writer role, I put in how my team that reported to me talked about me or had to say about me, what my manager had to say about me, and what my peers had to say about me, either as a writer or a person or whatever. It creates a 360 picture about me as a person and how I am fit for that role. Okay? So yeah, you have to prepare your resume. Next, so there are two kinds of resumes very briefly. There is a functional resume and there's a chronological resume. Most people, um, most people ask, for most people create a chronological where you created this, created that, your jobs and all that career wise. A functional resume is good for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience in a field, or you're transitioning into some new field. For example, from marketing to let's say you're transitioning to technical writing. So here's an example of a functional resume where you're focusing more on your skills. So writing and editing, communication skills. What are your management skills? Um, this was a student of mine. I used to be a lead faculty for tech comms program, certificate program in George Brown College in Toronto. And this was one of my students who I helped with the resume, and it came out really well. So She's listed here all the writing and editing skills, her core competencies, educational degrees, and her communication skills. So if you see, this is not a I worked here, I worked here, I worked here, I worked here. It's what can I offer you as an individual to the company. Okay, so think about all of these things about when you're creating a resume. Okay, now getting into the meat and potatoes of this particular presentation. So how do you prepare yourself, right? You do your homework. Please do prepare for interviews. I get a lot of people who come in not knowing who the client is, not knowing what the job role is. They just come in saying, hey, it's a tech writer job. Yes, it is. But when you ask people, how are you a good fit? Well, I've done RoboHelp, I've done Madcap Flare, I know data, I know user manuals. Yeah, but I don't need any of that crap. I don't use data. I don't use, all I use is Word, and I have, let's say, a networking or a cybersecurity domain. I don't care about your manufacturing or your IT or your networking or your blah 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 examples that you're giving me experience, right? So see how you fit into the role, not how the company is going to make sure how they can fit you in. You have to fit yourself into that role. So get the job description. You'll be surprised how many of the candidates who come for interviews have not looked at the job description. The recruiter calls them up. Are you available? Yes, I am looking for a job. Okay, here's a technical writing job. Interview at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Can you join? Yes. And they show up, not knowing a thing about the company, the name of the client, what they want to do, or they want what the requirements are. So please don't do that. Get the job description from the recruiter. Read the job description. Okay. Many times, I think one of the biggest issues a lot of companies or a lot of hiring managers are probably having is they say, oh, you know what, I go candidates tell them, I go to a lot of interviews these days, I'm attending 4 5 6 interviews a day and I'm confused. Hiring managers don't care how many interviews you attend on a day, week, or monthly basis, really, right? It's you who is attending that interview, and that's the only interview that company is bothered about, not how you did in Cisco, and not how you did in Philips, and not how you did it in IBM or Intel. How did you do in myabccorp.com? Okay, how are you prepared for that? The way you prepare yourself after you get the JD and you read the JD is you please go to the company website, you know, go to LinkedIn, look them up, explore who that works in that company. If it's a second level contact on LinkedIn, ask them to refer you to someone who works there, not to get yourself submitted, but to actually get yourself prepared. You can ask these people, hey, what kind of authoring environment do you have? How big is your team? Do you all work in one team, or are you all individually allocated to different projects, right? Knowing a lot of this information during the interview really helps, because they can see that, hey, if I am taking the effort of doing my homework and understanding the company's environment and the company's domain, uh, I'm going to do the same thing on the projects that you put me on if I'm hired. Okay, that's the impression people get. So look at company reviews, right? One of the best things to do is look at how the company is doing well. You absolutely don't want to bring up the bad part, the negative feedback that people are giving about the company, long hours, low pay, whatever. It doesn't matter. If that is a concern, don't apply, don't go for a job, don't think of joining them, obviously, right? So you always want to see, look at used case studies and see how they helped a certain customer or a certain domain, or how they implemented a certain technology in um, in helping the customer. And when you start throwing these bits and pieces, a very common question is, why do you want to work for us? Out comes this research that you have done. And you know what, I was really inspired to read about how you helped, that you went out of the way. And that's the kind of company that I really wish to be engaged with, or I really like to be associated with. Not only that, you should also research the competition of that company, because that tells you a lot about where this company that you have applied to stands. Are they behind the pack? Are they ahead of the pack? If they are ahead of the pack, great. It's a no-brainer, right? You want to join them. If they're behind, see how you can help them, you know, get successful. Maybe I'll help you reduce your customer support calls. I'll come up with some knowledge based articles that will help your reduce your help desk calls, whatever it is, right? Do this kind of research. Okay. um, that is really making yourself more competitive. I always say, rather than going to 10 or 5 or 9 or 15 interviews a week and sending out 20 resumes a month, send out only 4 a month or send out only 2 a week, and um, prepare very well for that, because your success rate, if you're prepared, is going to be much, much better. That is the um, that's the experience that I have so far. I prepare only for 2 or 3 jobs, but I do them very well, and I get either, at least out of 3, I get 2 or all the 3 calls. Um, Look at, as part of your preparing, look at the challenges that the org currently has, obviously from a documentation perspective, that you can solve, right? Maybe they are still in paper-based documentation, or maybe they're still doing PDFs, and it's a cloud kind of a company, hybrid company. Have they? Can I do some wikis for you? Can I do some robo help for you? Can we move you to electronic media somehow? Um, so that's the kind of conversation that you want to have with yourself first to prepare, and then have these kind of you know informations that or research that you have done. Make sure you bring it up during your interviews, because it really makes a big difference. So preparing yourself is one of the big steps that I think you should do. We'll come back if you have questions. Of course, we'll come back to that. But you have to anticipate questions. If you just go and Google for some common questions, right, you'll get a billion hits. But in general, there are two types of interviews, right? Questions. One is a technical, one is behavioral. Examples of technical, well, there's not really a technical, it's neither a technical nor this, but this is typically how you start. Tell me about yourself. And this is where it'll really help if you have taken the poll already. So can you, if you haven't, please take the poll and just answer whatever your thing is. I'm just curious to see what people think about, um, think about this. I'm just going to go to the poll. Get them all. Go there in a minute. Oops. Okay, yeah, I'll go there. Please take a minute to complete this. Tell me about yourself. What do you know about this role? That's a very common question, and it's one of the very first questions. Uh, is they want to know if you've looked at the JD, if you've looked at the company profile. What do we do? What does this company do? Or who are the core competitors, main competitors of this company? These are all very, very sort of basic questions that you must be prepared for in interviews. Otherwise, might as well not waste your and the poor interviewer's time. There's no point really in doing that. Secondly, so I'm looking at the poll here, um, and I'm seeing 43%. I'm just going to bring this up here. It says, tell me about yourself. It says 11% say that your journey from high school to current should be 2 to 4 minutes. Okay, about 47% think your experience that is specific to that job, and there's almost a 50-50 split between these two, your studies and full experience and all that. See, that depends. So tell me about yourself is a very, very common question. For me, I keep it down, or I would like the people I'm interviewing to keep them down to like 30, maybe 35 seconds. I don't care really, or I won't say I don't care, because this is not about what my interviewing skills are. I'm just saying the interviewee or whoever is the hiring manager, what are they interested in? They want to see when they ask you this, what you feel are your skills that you bring to this particular to the table for this particular job, right? They don't need to know where you did your 10th grade and that you play badminton as a hobby and you read books or you cook Punjabi or Chinese Manchurian dishes. Really not relevant. Maybe you can get into that later towards the end where you have this, you've built a good rapport. And oh, by the way, what do you do in your free time? Oh, I love to do X, Y, Z. But not in tell me about yourself where you're going on and on and on and on, because I'm on a timeline, the interviewer might be on a timeline, and they might have 4, 5, 6 interviews to cover that day. Um, this is just an icebreaker. Okay. So keep it short, keep it 30, 35 seconds. Be very specific to the kinds of experience you have in that particular using that tool that they use, using the kinds of, writing the kinds of developing the kinds of manuals the company needs or the technology they use, data or whatever, or if you've used API, if you've done API, or if you are good in cloud or Azure or, AWS, uh, and that's what the company requires. That those are the things that you should be pointing out to, rather than I did my 12th from Hyderabad and I did this from Pune and this, and no, not required. Why should we hire you? How are you a good fit for this role? Now, this is a good one. Okay. Um, do any of you actually think about this before you go into an interview? Why should we hire you? How are you a good fit? So I'm going to come back to this question. I have something to show you on this. Okay. We use RoboHealth, FrameMaker, Data, Madcap, X, Y, Z, A, B, C, but you have never used any of these tools. You have never used Data, and we use Data all the time. How do you really answer that question? Anyone who wants to take like 5, 10 seconds and answer this question? We use Data, we use FrameMaker, we use Structured FrameMaker, but you haven't used it. It's not on your resume. How do you answer that question? And you desperately want that job. Uh, Pritam, are you wanting to answer this question, or do you have a question of your own? Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I have someone said I have the competence to learn the new tool, but everyone does, right? What stands, are you standing out? Am I going to say I'm bad at learning tools? No one is going to say that. Everyone is going to say you've been in tech writing for so long, and one of the things you have to do as a tech writer is to learn quickly. It's true for every job. There's nothing special that we are selling ourselves by saying I can do this, I can do that, I can learn your tools fast. No, nothing. The way you answer this question is, I have never used FrameMaker, but I have used RoboHelp. I have never used RoboHelp, but I have used Madcap Flare, and they are very similar to each other in concept. They can both do single sourcing. They can both do, several outputs. So I can give you a PDF, I can give you an HTML5 compliant output, and I can do this and that. So I've used Madcap Flare. Yes, maybe it will be a couple of days of learning curve to really get to know the nuances of RoboHelp. But conceptually, Madcap is very similar to RoboHelp, and I have used Madcap. So we use RoboHelp. You have never used it, but I have used that, and there is a 80, 90, 70, whatever percent fit. Okay. You've never used Data. We use Data. Well, I'm quite familiar with the structured authoring, with the content management system, the archiving of topics, how the data map works, or how the taxonomy works. What you have to show them is not knowing something is not going to be a challenge, or it's not going to slow you down. It's just the name of the tool that they use is different, but conceptually you know it all. you know that is what you have to show. Not I can be a quick learner, but I can hire all the other 15 candidates. If that is the basis, it doesn't stand you out. Okay. um, so I don't, does that make sense? If not, we'll when we come back to the questions, feel free to bring this one up. but always tie into the skill that you have and how you can develop with this skill in you with you already. How can you take it further and use whatever specific tools they are using? Okay, coming back to how are you a good fit or why should we hire you? I generally go in with something that looks like I'll come back to this. Mm, sorry. Let me come back to this question, okay, in a minute. Now these are all technical questions, sort of. There are a lot more behavioral questions that you might get asked, right? So these are scenario based questions, and these scenarios are often what they are facing, right? So what would you do if you have an urgent deliverable for a go live tomorrow, and the VP of marketing comes and says, or sales or whatever comes and says, hey, I want this article press release written today quickly. It has to be published tomorrow. Now you have conflicting priorities. How would you handle something like that? So what would you do if, how would you handle a situation where you were asked to multitask, you were asked to do something, help someone who is on sick leave and still continue to deliver your work? These are all situational behavioral questions. How do you deal with difficult people? Okay. How do you deal with difficult people is an excellent question, because it actually shows your mentality and how you are, or are you a team player or not, right? When you say, well, if he's a difficult person, then I don't waste my time. I'll just go and tell his manager that he's being difficult and I'm done with it. I carry on with my own work. You might be the best writer in the world, but you just blew it over here as far as I'm concerned, because you cannot be an individual writer who is really good but who cannot get well, or who cannot deal with a team. Okay, and dealing with a team is what makes teams or companies deliver the products or the services that they do. It's not the one CEO, or not the one project manager, or not the one technical writer who delivers everything. It's a teamwork. So how do you deal with difficult people? Well, there are many techniques that you can deal with difficult people. One, I try to understand if he's really a difficult person or people have a wrong perception about this guy. I mean, this kind of a thought is going to say, whoa, okay, I never heard that one before. You know, the interviewer is going to say, yeah, that's a unique way of looking at it. Maybe everyone else in the company, so why are they asking this question? Because they probably have someone on the team um, who they think is a difficult person to deal with, because let's say 6 out of 15 people seem to have a problem with that one person, and they don't have problems with anyone else. So maybe I don't look at that person as a difficult person. It could really be that the person has some kind of work life balance issues, a lot of overloaded work, irritation. I'll try to understand what that is, and maybe I'll just you know work with him. But you want to say things like, I would not escalate as the first line of defense. Okay, I'll try to work it out. And if really push comes to shove, or I really start seeing the risk of falling behind in a lot of the deliverables, I might um, bring it up, have a team chat, and see how we can quickly resolve this issue. But that's the thought process they want. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer to this. It's just from your questions, do they think you are a good fit for their environment? That's it. There's nothing that you could have said differently that might have said, oh yeah, he's the best fit. No, it's the culmination of all of these interview questions that you're being asked. How do you get technical comments from someone who is never available? I think we probably memorize the answer to this one, because you get it everywhere. So you should be prepared with this. How do you get technical comments? Maybe I'll just go and quickly ask him at a water fountain and having coffee. Maybe I'll keep an eye when he goes down for a coffee on his own or going out. He say, hey, can I tag along with you? And maybe I'll just ask him one or two questions which I need his feedback from. It's just not coming in a written form or official email. I don't need it. I can just ask him. As long as I get his thought process, I'm good. So you just want to show the person interviewing you that you're willing to work at it. You're not going to go be crying around, say, I can't deliver this, I can't deliver that. He's the one to blame. He's the one to blame. No, nothing like that. You're a team player. Has anyone heard of this star story? So star stories are really good if you can prepare yourself for star stories. Okay, here's one. Um, I'm going to just open this one here. Okay, star story. This is a behavioral question that you might get asked. Tell me about a time when you encountered a problem on your job and how you solved it. Okay, how you encountered a problem. So I sort of came up with one where I noticed when I joined as a manager for my team, there were a lot of escalations happening due to quality issues. Okay, that's situation. Star is basically situation, task, action, result. What was the situation, problem situation? Um, sorry, what tasks or what did you do? What tasks had to be done, you thought? What action did you take? And what was the result? So, due to quality issues, there were a lot of escalations. My number one task was to reduce the number of escalations that we were getting. Uh, Action that I did to fulfill this task, I did a deep dive and I listed out all the factors that were resulting into these escalations or issues. And I worked with my team to agree on the biggest problem. It could be lack of this, lack of that, and no one really knew what to do after a document was done, whatever it is. And the result is that escalations reduced by, sales went up by, number of calls reduced by so and so over the next 1 quarter, 2 quarters, 3 quarters. That kind of a thing makes your answer for a situation bang on. I mean, you told them what you did, why you did that, and how quickly you were able to get results. Okay, and I'll be happy to send you something along these lines later on. But prepare yourself. Just search for star stories. It's a common interviewing techniques that people who go for interviews talk about. So tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult customer, right? So I won't go into details for the time constraint, but definitely think about the star story. Now, in preparing yourself, I said I'll come back to this. Yeah, that question of how do you fit in or what can you offer us, right? I like to do what's known as a why hire me kind of a document, which looks something like this. Okay. And I actually take this with me in a printed form, and it has my name. It has definitely, um, you know, um, the why hire me on it. And this is what makes me a great fit. And where do you think all this is coming from? This whole thing is coming from job description and what that job description, the parts that map into my resume. Okay, so I'm looking at the job description. I take my resume that I've sent to this particular company. This was some job that I applied in when I was in uh, Toronto. So you can see eHealth Ontario, MCYSS is Ministry of Children, Youth and Social Services, INIT cluster. Um, so they wanted some training. They wanted someone who could be a good teacher, trainer, and they wanted IT and all that. I said I'm a certified training professional. I have taught. This is what I get. So basically, this is what makes me a great fit, coming directly from your job description. And here are all the different um, documentation tools that I have done and the kinds of documents I've delivered, right? Uh, and something again from my LinkedIn recommendation that speaks to the above and proves my point, but I'm not saying it. People I've worked with, my managers, they are the ones who are saying it, you know. And when they look at something, it was nice to be able to present an idea from it and have him translate it into something meaningful. That's basically it is, right? They just give me a problem statement and I come up with uh, a solution, and this is how I gained it, and this is what people have to say about it. about me, right? So why hire me? When they ask you a question like this, imagine the joy on your on your hiring manager's face when you say, "Hey, you know what? I did a lot of thinking. I've done some good thinking on what makes me a good fit, and here is everything that I think really I will bring to the table." And you slide it on the table to them and say, "By the way, please feel free to hold on to this." And you see that I don't have my phone number or my email on this, because I also attach my resume behind this, which has my all my details, contact, LinkedIn, e-portfolio, everything is there. And so when I leave it, they probably do this. When I leave the after the interview, I say thanks and great meeting you, and I leave the room. They probably take my paper and just put it on the desk like this, right? And tomorrow morning when he comes back to the office and he's trying to clean the table, he sees my name pop up, and he sees that I am a good fit and my name is right there in big and bold. It's basically playing on the psyche that, this is what makes me a great fit. Guess if you do this kind of homework, there's no one that's going to come and say you're not prepared for this job. Okay. And last 2 minutes of my presentation, how many of you say, "I don't have any questions, you've answered it all"? When they say, "Do you have any questions for us?" Okay. If you do, your chances that you were getting a job have just been nullified, because there is no way that you don't have any questions. You have not worked for the company, you don't know their environment, you don't know the processes, you don't know the team, you don't know the domain, you don't know what their competitor, nothing, and still you don't have any questions. So always have questions for them. What can you ask them? What would the first 2 3 weeks or the first month or the first week look like on this job if I were to join? Okay, turn it around. Say, if I accepted your offer, rather than saying, if you get selected, uh, you know, you will let you know. No, turn it around and say, you know what, you need me more than I need you. And what would the first 2 or 3 weeks look like if I accept this job? Now you are interviewing that person. Make it prominently known to him that you're not just going to take any offer that comes. That might be true, but you don't have to let the other guys know that, right? So ask them, what would the first day, first month, first 2 weeks look like? And based on the answer, you're getting a lot of the thing. Oh, they have an onboarding process. Oh no, they don't have an onboarding. We just give you a laptop and hook you up with the user ID and password on the application and hope you start sailing. Okay, that's fine. It's a startup kind of a mentality. You might want to ask them, what does a typical day for a technical writer look like? Oh, we have scrums when we have a meeting with product owner, and we have these technical calls. Oh, it looks like this meeting all day. And you can prepare yourself accordingly if you join if you join that company. What challenges does your documentation team face today? You know, barely anyone, barely anyone is going to come and tell you that we don't have any challenges. No, uh, that such a company doesn't exist, at least that I know of. Everyone is going to have some kind of a challenge, so you can ask them that. Okay, and finally you can ask them all about the tools and the authoring environment, what kind of teams, what are team dynamics, how does the documentation team work with the project management team or PMO, or how do they work with product management. Is there a customer success, customer support kind of a team, and does a technical writing team work closely with all those teams, right? What are your processes? Do you have an editorial process? Do you have a release management process? Um, there are a million questions that you can ask them, right? When and one good also thing is to be assertive. Last question, maybe you can, when can I expect to hear from you next? So not like you have had this interview, you spent an hour, good hour of your time speaking to the company, and now they've gone into the oblivion, and you never to be heard of again for the next whatever. Ask them, then okay, if they say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're not going to have to follow up within the next 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, you can think about following up then, right? So that's what basically I had. Thank you for your attention. I really appreciate it. And now, if there are any questions, I'm also looking at the questions that I had got um, on my this thing. But yeah, if there are any questions, please ask me now. You can unmute yourself and ask.
Uh, Hi Sumedh.
So,
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
can see one question here in the chat. So
yeah.
it says, is it okay if we contact your manager for feedback? How to answer that question in the end?
Is it okay if you contact your manager for feedback? Obviously, if you are on a good talking terms with your manager and your manager knows that you are going to be bailing out soon, sure. There's nothing like having your manager give feedback. But second, if your manager is going to be shocked that you are looking, obviously the answer is no. And you can say it in no uncertain terms that I would like to keep this interview um, confidential till such a time that you give me an offer. Once you give me an offer, I'll be more than happy to for you to go and ask. um, you know you can go and ask how to do this and how to do that. But till such a time, if you're not hiring me, I don't want you going to my manager and disclosing to them that I've been interviewing with you. I want it to be very classified. That's a straightforward, no bullshit kind of an answer, which is fine. Okay. um
sure. Thank you for that, Sumedh. I have one more question to ask.
yeah,
Thanks
Himanshu,
for
yeah.
that.
Uh,
Speaking about the, yes, please. Sorry.
Excuse me. Can you just post it in the chat? That would be great.
Actually, it is a specific question regarding the PPT which Sumedh has just shown.
Okay. Yeah, go
Speaking
ahead.
about the psyche of the interviewer, doesn't that sound a bit arrogant if we say that when I accept your offer rather than he is suggesting that if we hire you? I mean, it varies from case to case basis, but definitely is the mind of the interviewer open enough, or does it sound a bit arrogant and then it just reduces your chance to be getting selected, something like that?
That's a good point, Himanshu. So basically, what can happen is it can go two ways. One, one way it could go is they are impressed with your confidence, and they say, yeah, you know what, I really like the assertiveness. The other way it can go is, man, this guy is really full of himself or herself, and they have an ego. So you don't want to say, if I accept you, then we'll see what to do. No, you just say that, if we go ahead with this, you don't have to say if I accept, but you can say something to the tune of, if we go ahead with this process to the next step, or if you were to onboard me onto the team, then, so you can say it in a way that you are hinting to the interviewer that just by you saying yes or no is not going to make or break this interview. It's a two-way process, right? It's not one way. That if you say yes, there is a chance that I may say no, because there are so many other jobs out there. I may change my mind. You may not offer me whatever I'm asking for. There are a million parameters to that. But you always want to not give the desperation to them and say, if you say yes, I'm jumping at it. So without being arrogant, try to say something like, as I said, if we were to go ahead with this, what would whatever that is that you want to ask.
Sure, understood. Thank you, Sumedh.
Yeah.
Thank you, Himanshu, for your question. The next question is how to build effective portfolio.
Yeah. So if you give me a second, I'm actually going to get something quickly. While can you ask me the next question? I'll come back to this one in a minute.
Actually, there is no other question I can see in the chat uh,
Okay.
apart from the
So
one.
so here's the couple that I have come up with, and you know what? I am going to, while I speak to this question here, I've highlighted the questions that are relevant for the job interviews. Um, so, do you think the current and most common technical writing interview techniques and procedures are really effective at picking up the right candidate or judging them on the most relevant skills? Um, well, it may or may not be, but what matters is not what we think is the right technique or not. A technique that works for me in my company may not work for someone else in some other company, or someone else in my shoes. if they are hiring for this position and I'm not around, let's say, their techniques are going to be totally different. So absolutely, written tests, behavioral questions, asking tough questions like how would you do this, how would you do that. There's a lot of, you know there's another technique where you push the candidate to just see what their breaking point is. You start getting into an argument, sort of. No, but when you say this, what do you mean by that? Okay, but this is what you wrote on your exam. Do you think this is right, or your test? Do you think this is the right way of writing it? You get a little confrontational with them and see how they behave. Because let's say if you are in a kind of a situation where you have a lot of stress and you have to work with a lot of stressful situations, you want to see how they handle stress. Do they absorb it, or they reflect it back, right? So there are a lot of different techniques that you can use to interview people, and whether something works for them is subjective. It works for me, and I'm the hiring manager, it works for the company, because otherwise they would not have given the authority for me to hire, right? Y- the second thing is, always think, if you are on the interviewing side, okay, not the candidate but the hiring manager, think about it this way. You individually may not be the person who is going to be working with this guy or this team as frequently as your team is, right? So try to come up with a plan where you have your team members also interviewing this candidate, and have them ask a lot of questions as well, right? Because they are the ones who are going to be more closely working this person than you are. You might be just supervising, or it depends. I mean, a lot of managers don't do any writing. They only interact when there's an issue or when there's a problem. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different techniques. So write written interviews, asking them the kind of questions that people in the past or the teams are currently struggling with, right? Those are the kinds of questions that work. And where you have companies that constantly say, oh man, we hired the wrong person, this guy is not the right one for this job, that's the answer, Gitanjali. That is where the interviewing techniques are not working as well as they should for that particular company, right? um, I think, Puneet, how are we doing on time? Do we have question for one or two more, time for one or two more questions, or
We have some questions.
yeah,
Yeah, we have some questions in the chat as well. So
Yeah.
should I continue
sure,
with that, Sumedh?
please,
Yes,
please, please.
let's take five
Yeah,
minutes. Well,
yeah. So the second question that we have received is, what is your weakness? If you're asked that question, how to answer that question?
Yeah, that's a good one, because you never want to say I don't have a weakness. As Himanshu was asking, that sounds arrogant, because then you would be I don't know, some kind of, you would be in a god mode situation. But everyone has a weakness. What I learned, and I've never used this so much, I don't think, but a lot of times people say, um, use the weakness and make it into your strength, right? Nowadays, I think a lot of people who really know how to interview, they don't ask these questions, because I can turn it around very quickly. I say, you know, I have a weakness of attention to detail, and that sometimes makes me cram for time, because I want to get everything right. Now, this is weakness. The time management is a weakness, but in the flip side is that I'm giving a higher quality. So that leaves the interviewers being like, shit, what does that mean? Right. So it's very easy to get wiggle out of those kind of questions. I don't feel any value add into that, because then, so what is your weakness? You definitely don't want to give a closed answer. You want to give an open-ended answer. You can't say I get irritated very quickly, or when I get mad, I start shouting. These are all weaknesses, and we do it every day. I'm like, क्या पागल आदमी है यार ये, क्या करके रखा है, क्या लिख के रखा है, all these things happen. But that is not a weakness you want to disclose to someone else, right? Your weakness can be that you say something like, you get irritated when people don't come prepared to the team meeting unprepared. Like, they want to review the document during the call. instead coming prepared with questions for the call and not reviewing the sheet on the call, right? Yeah, that's your weakness. You don't find people come prepared. How is that going to help you succeed in the job? What is the learning out of that weakness? Nothing, right? So you can always say something like, I do have an attention to detail which sometimes used to cause me time delays, but now I've learned to work with it and all that. So you can wiggle out of that. In so have yourself, you can definitely say something like this. um, my weakness is that some of the grammatical errors are my pet peeves, and I catch them very very quickly. And so when I'm doing peer reviews or when I'm doing editorial reviews, I not only go into the substantive editing. Substantive editing means that the sentence and the paragraph and the document as a whole makes sense, but I also go into the copy editing part and I fix those as well. That quickly makes your weakness that you are supposed to be only doing technical edits or peer reviews, not grammatical issues. I also correct the things that I see are wrong, which may be out of scope for my editorial reviews at that time. So you can use these kind of techniques to do something like that.
Madhvi,
Okay.
let's take just one more question for now. Rest we can take later.
Yeah, Puneet. So the next question is, when asked for work samples, if we are not in a position to provide work samples due to constraints, how do we deal with that situation?
Yeah, so that is going to be a very common thing. It's very very good to say that, I'm sorry, I will not be able to share anything with you on the phone. And if it means, well, then we may not be able to have this interview, fine, so be it. Second, what you can do is you can always come up with a sample online help or user manual or troubleshooting manual for some shareware, some openware, freeware kind of applications. Just go to twocows.com or cnet.net and download some tool that you really like, some utility like clock or world clock, something like that, and document it and show that as a sample. People don't necessarily need to see what you did in a corporate environment. People want to see what your writing skills are, how you format, how you frame a sentence. Why a sentence that is framed like this? Why not some other way, right? So those are the kinds of things you want to show, and you can say, I'm sorry, I will not be able to show you anything because I've signed NDAs, but I'm happy to show you this, which is something I did. You can make a portfolio, you can make a PowerPoint presentation, you can write a blog, you can create user guides, you can create installation manuals, you can convert the user guide from PDF and Word into an HTML base using either Data with Open Toolkit, FrameMaker, and Bootstrap, or you can also use uh, evaluation version of RoboHelp, download Captivate and do a video of the installation, and now add it and embed that video with your online help. Now you are showing your instructional design skills, which is the next webinar, I think. So you can give an overall good, well-rounded picture of you as and show all the samples without compromising any of the NDA commitments that you might have.